Hugh Freeze speaks to the media on Monday and makes a pretty bold statement about the game plan Saturday versus Oklahoma.
In the world full of podcasts, he's the undisputed heavyweight champion of hot takes, an Auburn sports homer, master of the boog, and message board legend. Get your buttons buttoned and your hats flattened because the Top Button Podcast is about to kick off. And you don't want to miss your courtside seat. Now, here's your host, Charlie 5.
Yes, sir. We're back. It's another episode of the Top Button Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Rush, a.k.a. Charlie 5, and we're ready to get into it today on this Tuesday. Talk a little bit about Mondays are obviously Hugh Freeze's media days. He has 2 media appearances. He does his Monday press conference, then he does Tiger Talk now on Mondays versus Thursdays. And Hugh Freeze is honest, sometimes to a fault, and he says a lot of things. Gets a lot of headlines, but he said some bold things about the game plan on both sides of the ball, and then kind of opened up situationally. There was a lot of situational questions that were asked, and I felt like he gave some really honest answers. A lot of hindsight that was looked at, and I think some regret as well. But we're definitely going to dive into all of it. But before we get started, we got to give a shout out to Mybookie.ag. Use coupon code NEXTROUND for a double-up deposit bonus on your first deposit. Give them $250. Doesn't matter. $250, $300, $400, whatever, up to $1,000. They're going to give you that amount back in free play money. So give them $400. They're going to give you another $400 back on top of it to play with. Hit you a big parlay, live betting, first half, second half, whatever. Their platform is great. It's easy to navigate, and they got all the different lines. If you love to play a lot, if you love to get a lot of plays in as far as college football goes, whether it be, again, totals, whatever, they have it all. It's a great sports book. You need to check it out. Mybookie.ag. So again, Monday was is media day for Hugh, and he made a statement in regards to it was one of his opening statements too, and it was in regards to the game plan for the Oklahoma game. And he said it's really, honestly, one of the best ones he's ever been around. One of the best game plans that he feels like they've put together on paper, and for the most part executed it almost flawlessly for 3 quarters and some change. Just about executed the game plan as best as you possibly could. Everything sort of played out the way they expected it to. And I think as a coach, that's a big, that gives you a little bit of a confidence boost, at least, regardless of the fact that you came out with a loss, you're able to diagnose what you need to get done. And then you're able to, for the most part, execute what you need to get done. I mean, if you really think about it, you're sort of reeling, and you're going into a game against Oklahoma, a top 25 team, one of the best defenses in the country, and then an offense that is not explosive, but they don't turn the ball over, and they just sort of live to play another day. So that's what you got to go up against. They don't allow a lot of rushing yards. They don't allow a lot of yards per carry. And so what do you do when you're not really sure about how to pass the ball? You devise a plan, and you come out and you throw for a ton, and you're very effective running the ball, and you kind of give yourself a chance to win. But let's break it down a little bit further. Defense, obviously, again, 3 sacks on a very mobile quarterback, I think is fantastic. You're able to get off the field on third down, 2 out of 11 third downs. You've been criticized all year about not being able to get off the field. And really, I think only the 2 biggest conversions, one of them was on a penalty, if I'm not mistaken. And then I'm not really sure what the other conversion on third down was that Oklahoma had, but you were able to put some young guys in there to make a lot of plays. I just overall felt like the defense played fantastic. Sort of dictated what Oklahoma was going to do on offense. The defense kind of dictated that, and it was, other than 2 big plays. If you just if you're able to, not let them take the top off there at the end, and then obviously the first busted play that just seemed like you had maybe some missed assignments or you miscontain and the guy goes for 50 yards. Those two plays were basically the vast majority of their offense. You hold them under their season average, which wasn't great to begin with, but you hold them under their season average in total yards. And overall, I thought the game plan was again on defense. Again, this is 5 weeks in a row. The game plan on defense was good enough to win. The game plan on defense was more than enough to win that football game, and that's something that's definitely something that you can hang your hat on. That's definitely something that you can be, I guess, a little bit excited about. But can you keep those guys, coming back to the table every single day, every single, putting their helmet on, getting ready to go, and doing that with, with the results that you're getting, I guess. So great defensive game plan, but the offensive game plan is what was so impressive to me. Just to give you some perspective, Tennessee is the number 3 offense in the country. And they're really, the reason they're not the number 1 offense in the country is because they played Oklahoma last week and only gained 345 yards. Oklahoma kind of contained them. Now, it was on the road. It was at Oklahoma, which road games, I understand, they're tougher than home games. But 345 yards to Auburn's 482. You had 4 plays for over 30 yards, 3 plays for over 40 yards. Auburn now leads the country in plays over 40 yards. A lot of people, when I made that, talked about that stat, I think maybe last week or the week prior, everybody sort of mocked the schedule. Well, what about the schedule? What about this? What about that? Well, I mean, they're doing it against everybody they play against. So the schedule is what it is, but every time they go out, they make big plays on offense. And they did that again against Oklahoma in bunches. Again, this is not a team that really gives up a ton of yards. And Auburn kind of gashed them, and I thought that was really good. I mean, that's got to give you confidence again as a coach to know that you can go up against one of the better defensive minds in college football and sort of dice them up and keep them off balance. You just got to finish the game. Time of possession, there's been a lot made out of time of possession, which I think time of possession can be a little bit misleading because when you lack in time of possession, it looks like your offense stinks and your defense stinks because you're not able to sustain drives offensively, and then defensively, you're not able to get off the field. Okay, so if you look at time of possession, a lot of Auburn's games, especially the Cal and the Arkansas game, the time of possession is really lopsided. So if you just look at that stat, you're like, man, the offense sucked and the defense sucked. So that's not good. But in reality, the turnovers are what changed the time of possession. When you're not able to sustain drives, not because you can't move the ball, but you're not able to sustain drives because you turn the ball over. You're getting yards, but you're turning the ball over. And then the defense, you're putting them on the field more. You're putting them on the field quicker, and you're not giving them the time to rest, not because you can't move the ball again, but because you're turning it over. So the time of possession has been lopsided in these Power 5 games because of the turnovers. Well, Auburn didn't turn it over, and look what happened. That up until the very end of the game, you didn't turn the ball over, and it really reflects in my opinion, more of the true function of the offense, the true function of the defense, and what it looks like from a game control perspective, from a time of possession. Auburn held the ball for 11 more minutes than Oklahoma. That's a recipe for winning football games. When you're able to control the game, you're able to dictate the game on both sides of the ball, you're going to win football games. And that's when Hugh, he talks about the results, and obviously the results are not great. The results are not ideal. But when you look at those things from that perspective, you also can take the words that he says and say, when we're not far off, and you can put some validity behind it. You can put some You can put some, you can put some validity behind it. You can look at the way the statistics are moving and see that there is progress being made, and there's just a few little things that have to be cleaned up. And then you're going to be able, I think it's going to end up yielding the results. And it's really hard to argue that unless you just assume that you're always going to have make the same mistakes, which is fine. I mean, fine and probably fair at the same time. But overall, I did feel like the game plan was really good. You got to finish. You got to finish. You can't let situations overtake you. You got to finish from a player perspective, and you got to finish from a coaching perspective. And Hugh mentioned that multiple times. Before I switch to the next topic, we got to give a shout out to our boy Ford Stokes with Active Wealth Management. Look, I know that you've been taught, get your 401k, get your savings, get this, get that. But do you really have someone that you can lean on to make sure that everything you're doing is big or is maximizing all the potential that you possibly have? Ford Stokes is that guy for you. I mean, I just keep saying it. He is the guy that you can lean on to point you in the right direction, to make sure you have the right products, to make sure you have the right plan. He's the guy for you. Go to retirementresults.com/plan. Hey, just why not double check? Why not, just make sure that everything's moving in the right direction. He's the guy for you. Tell him War Eagle, tell him I sent you. Ford Stokes with Retirement Results, presented by Active Wealth. The goal line wildcat play is something that's been on my mind. The goal line 2 wildcat plays has been on my mind. And he was obviously asked about it. And he said, in hindsight, I wish we would have ran Jarquez. And obviously me too, because I dislike the wildcat. I never really liked the wildcat. I'm pretty anti-wildcat in every situation. Okay. This is not so much about the wildcat in general, and the discussion around it, but as a comment Hugh made that I thought was interesting. So there's so many times the post-game press conference, I can't put them in situations like that. I've got to coach them better. It stings when they play their guts out and I can't coach them to a victory. All these things that are, obviously taking the blame, like shouldering the blame, literally like he's done every week. But he's asked about this and asked why, I guess a little bit more in detail about that play. And he started to answer, and he's kind of paused, and he said, well, look, I come out here and I tell y'all why things don't work, and I get thrown under the bus or I get accused of throwing people under the bus. So I'm going to tell you what happened. But this is what I'm doing. Like I'm being, and I appreciate that from Hugh, the ability to, or not the ability, but the openness to, I'll tell you exactly why. And a lot of coaches don't do this. I'll tell you exactly why the play was supposed to work, and I'll tell you why it didn't work. Okay. And then obviously I'll tell you that I probably shouldn't have called the play. I mean, he basically said all those things. And I think I like that little nod to, hey, why are y'all don't ask me questions about why something didn't work the way it did. And if I give you the answer, you get me for throwing somebody under the bus when I just answered your question. But no, he said, obviously that play works in practice. You got to keep Oklahoma, guessing, and I get that to an extent. If you just line up and run, if we were just lining up and it was a no-brainer run, we struggled a little bit. Even though Jarquez was having a big game, if you think that because he was averaging 5.7 yards a carry, and they were on the 1, so that means he would have easily run for that touchdown and hit the goalpost. I mean, then you're just not being you're not being honest with yourself. Okay. I personally would have loved to seen just like a regular type offensive formation. If you're going to use Sam Jackson, don't maybe not go with a wildcat, but just go with like a regular RPO, but but maybe more read option with a run option with a passing outlet, something like that. I just don't like lining up and they know we're going to run it, even though we have more blockers. Stuff can happen. And he said it, they had a player that was supposed to be, not supposed to be. Brandon Frazier was really good at that particular formation. They've been practicing this for a while. And obviously Brandon Frazier was out, and the guy that was in had some issues, ended up taking out one of their pulling blockers and one of their pullers, and where it should have walked into the end zone, it got muddied up and they had issues. So I like that he tells us things like that. But obviously when you have the media that are the way they are, they're going to latch on to little bitty sound bites and things like that and kind of spin it. But I liked him calling them out on that. So if you're going to ask him the questions, let him answer it. And then take the whole context of the press conference to decide whether if he's taking the blame or if he's throwing people under the bus. I'd rather see a little bit more honesty from that, in my opinion. The last thing, and just let me re-emphasize, I don't like the Wildcat. I cannot stand the Wildcat. I never want to see the Wildcat again. I don't care if you do the Wildcat with Jarquez Hunter. I don't like the Wildcat. We've run it 4 or 5 times this year. It's yielded no yard, maybe 1 yard. I guess you could count that since they ran it twice and they got from the 2 to the 1. I guess you can count that as 1 yard, but it's yielded very little yardage and a penalty. And I feel like that's what I kind of feel like that's what it ends up doing. Now, I'm sure there's so much of a good explanation, and there's so many good schematic reasons why you do it in certain situations. I just don't like it. I just don't feel like it. I'm just not a fan. So they ran it. It is what it is. But hopefully we never see it again. All right. Situations versus abilities. This is something I talked about with Tyler Siskey. This is something that I talked about. I've talked about a bunch of times, and Hugh addressed it too. He said, basically, I got it when I can't put players in situations that are, I guess, exceed their abilities. Okay. And I think this was in regards to the last drive, the interception. And I think I want to try to read Hugh's mind and what he meant here. But basically what I think is Peyton struggles a little bit, not a little bit. He struggles a lot in pressure situations when things aren't going well. When things are going really good, he looks like Joe Montana. Like he can kind of put it wherever he wants to put it. When the plan's working, when there's not a lot of adversity, he can throw dimes. And that's what he did. He lit Oklahoma up because everything was working. They were off balance. But when you get into obvious situations, what I think you can't do with Peyton, in my opinion, is put him in a situation where there has to be a pass. Okay. And that's what happened on that 3rd and 4. It was 5 wide receivers. There's no option. There's no option for a run. I guess you could have a quarterback run, but that's not one of the reads. That's not the reads is one of these 5 receivers. Okay. So you got to pick the right one. And they obviously baited him into an interception. He can throw a slant. Like that's not asking him to go outside of his abilities. That's the pass he threw to Sam Jackson. He can make any throw on the field. So when you're saying you can't put players in situations that are outside of their abilities, I think what he's trying to say is I got to do a better job of giving Peyton, not asking Peyton to do, like, I got to think about the way Peyton thinks and think about the way things go when things start going south, and look at the situation and then, diagnose or call the play in that with that mindset. And I think that's, I've been saying that for over a week now. that a pass right there is fine. An RPO right there is fine. Like you've been running RPOs all day. An RPO right there is fine, but don't put Peyton in a situation where there's nothing but pass. Like it's pass, but figure out who it is I got to pass to. That's where he struggles. That's where he struggles. And even though it was still sort of a freakish play and Jeremiah Wright knocked the guy a little bit further back into the passing lane, it still was going to be a tough play. It probably would have gotten batted down, which obviously we would have all taken that. But again, I think that's a little bit of self-understanding to understand, hey, I got to be a little bit more careful with certain people. I got to understand what the max of their abilities are, and that's part of coaching. And I think that was another thing of him putting the blame on himself. I've got to do a better job of knowing who I have, knowing what they can execute, and then trying to build around that. And for the most part in that game, they did really, really well. He talked more about, not being super far off, and the results are not acceptable, and how he just, hang in there with us. We're close and we're getting there. We're recruiting well. We're doing the right things. We're getting closer. Just hang in there with us, and we'll get there. And I really do believe that, because obviously I can see, I'm not trying to look at the game just from a wins and loss perspective. I look at a lot of things like, are we getting better? Are we doing the things off the field we need to be doing? And then, are we continuing to kind of move in the right direction? And I feel like we are. You just got to break through. You got to break through and win one. And I'm hoping that, maybe we can get one this weekend. You got to get a couple to get to bowl season, but it's going to be a tough hill to climb. You kind of put yourself behind the 8 ball, but we'll see what happens. His press conferences are always interesting. We have a press conference thread and discussion every week at thebarnauburn.com. You can jump in, get in the mix, be a part of it. It's a lot of fun. Just go to thebarnauburn.com. It's $1 for your first month. And then just $9.95 after that. It's you got team insight, recruiting insight, and then again, you just have great discussion and great community. And I feel like it's different than most places, because I feel like we get along, and it's not a lot of name calling. There's emotion, obviously, but it's just a good group of folks, and it's growing, and we're having a lot of fun. So come be a part of it. If you don't like toxicity, I think this is the place for you. You can just have an honest discussion and, maybe make some friends at the same time. So check us out, thebarnauburn.com. If you like this video, like it. If you like this channel, subscribe to it. Follow me on Twitter, _Charlie_5. And we're going to get back after it every single day. It's another episode of the Top Button Podcast. Stay buttoned.
Thanks for listening, and drive home safely.